Good afternoon. I am Elizabeth Bueller, Vice President of IAP2 Intermountain, and I want to welcome you to this month's IAP2 Intermountain's Learning Lunch. I am very excited about the program today because we are learning about a 2021 IAP2 Core Value Award winner from our chapter. Today, we have Stacy Adams, Public Involvement and Communication Leader with Avenue Consultants and former President of IAP2 Intermountain, as well as Christiana Johnson with Salt Lake City's engagement team in the Media Services Department. I'm very excited about this project. Today, Stacy and Christiana will be talking about the 300 West Reconstruction Project and how it set a gold standard for public engagement in Salt Lake City. Before they begin, I'm going to turn it over to IAP2 Intermountain Chapter President, David Jones, to talk a little bit about the chapter. David.
Well, I'm fiddling with my buttons there. Sorry, everyone, and welcome everyone once again. As Liz said, I'm the current chapter president, and it's a pleasure to see you all joining us. For those of you who have met me, welcome back. For those of you who haven't attended one of our learning lunches, it's great to see you here. It's also great to see Stacy and CJ in the virtual squares out there. We've been doing a lot at the Intermountain chapter. It's a very exciting time, even though we've been in the midst of this crazy pandemic, and we've found a way to, with the help of Liz and all of our team, all of the officers, we found a way to continue to bring you good content and amazing lectures. So I don't want to spend too long, but we've got a wonderful chapter. If you have any questions, please, leave comments in the chat box. We also have a wonderful website that has all this information, and I'm sure that will get into the chat box as well before we're all said and done. And without further ado, I really hope you enjoy today. If you hear snacking noises in the background, it's because this is a lunch and learn. So while we hope you'll participate, if you want to snack and keep your camera off, that's okay too. So Stacy, CJ, take it away.
All right, David, thanks so much. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. CJ and I are really excited to be able to tell you about Salt Lake City's 300 West project. Liz mentioned, I'm Stacy Adams. I do work here at Avenue Consultants. We're in Taylorsville, and we support the city on a number of transportation projects, including 300 West.
Awesome, thanks, Stacy. Yeah, and I am Christiana. I go by CJ. I am on the Salt Lake City Civic Engagement team. So I just support public engagement with lots of different city projects. And a lot of them end up being streets and transportation projects like the 300 West one. So yeah, I'm excited to be here today. So again, oh, 1 second, I need to figure out sharing screen. So one second. Okay, I think we can do it now. 1 second. Yes, okay, there we go. All right. So yeah, Stacy, do you want to kind of kick off kind of giving a quick overview, and then we can talk about the rest of the team? Oh, you're muted.
So we created this PowerPoint to actually give a presentation to IAP2 USA to do a webinar on the award that we won for 300 West. It was a core values general project award for public engagement. And so we put this together. We really wanted to frame it as reimagining 300 West. And that's the process we used to design the public involvement component for the project. We've been working on this since 2019. Has been a while. The project is currently in construction right now. We're moving into the second year of construction. And CJ, I think we're going to the next slide now.
Yes, awesome. So yeah, so Stacy and I just wanted to include this slide with the other kind of key staff on this project, just because, you know, Stacy and I were able to work on the public engagement side of this project, you know, really, again, early on, you know, years ago, before we were, you know, really working on the design and everything. But we just wanted to include the information about Will Becker, who is the Salt Lake City Transportation Project Manager for 300 West, and Blake Ungren, who was the kind of consultant project manager for Avenue Consultants. And we just wanted to just give them a shout out and just, you know, really note that this was a huge collaborative effort with lots of people across the city. And Stacy and I were just lucky to be able to support the public engagement side of it. But before we really dive into the presentation, we wanted to actually do a little icebreaker. So I'm actually going to take this down and put up Mentimeter. So I don't know if any of you have used Mentimeter before. I feel like we've used it a lot, especially since COVID began. So I'm going to go to that now. And I think Liz can post the instructions in the chat. Okay. Okay, so if everyone can, yeah, pull up either your phone or a computer and go to menti.com and enter in where you work, and kind of let this open-ended. It could be, you know, the city that you're either working for, the city that you're working in, or maybe either are you working in the office or working from home still. So yeah, I just wanted to get a sense of where everyone is at. So I'll give it another minute or so for people to type answers. Oh yeah, Bozeman, Missoula. Yeah, nice. Montana is well represented. Salt Lake City, office home mix, the hybrid. I think that's, you know, becoming more and more common. State of Utah. Nice. Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll maybe give just 30 more seconds. Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, we definitely have a kind of a good mix of Utah and Montana. I don't know if anyone else is represented here, but yeah, thank you so much for being here today to listen to what our experience has been like working on this project in Salt Lake City. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the next slide, and we just wanted to hear, you know, what's the most transformational project that you have worked on? So you can type your answer here, and then, you know, we have a pretty small group. We can maybe have one person share, but we can just maybe see what people have to put up. But yeah, 300 West has been one of the most transformational projects I've worked on, and construction is still happening, so it's not done yet, but it's really exciting, which we'll talk more about in our presentation. But I'll give a few more seconds for people to type just a quick answer of what they feel like has been the most transformational project they've worked on.
And if you haven't worked on a transformational project, feel free to just mention too that you're looking for the opportunity.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Like funding our future. That's that's a huge thing for us here, and a big part of the 300 West project. So that's awesome. Equity roundtable. big new road construction. Yeah, that's, obviously a huge one. Yep, funding our future. Nice. Yeah, I know a lot of Salt Lake City folks here. It's been a big part of the city and will continue to be a big part of the city. So awesome. Okay, well, this was great. I'll just maybe leave this here, and we can get back into the 300 West presentation. But thanks so much for doing that little kind of icebreaker, just to be thinking about what you all are working on now that but now we'll talk about 300 West. So, okay. Well, lots of screen sharing. Okay, so we are actually going to start off by having playing a video that we made for this project, actually, that Stacy and I feel like really sets the scene kind of for what the project is, and then we can talk about it more. So I'm going to share that. Okay. Oh, 1 second.
The time has come to reconstruct 300 West in Salt Lake City. We're going to upgrade utilities, repave the street, smooth it, paint it, fix up the sidewalks, and check that out. It's like 300 West never got old in the first place. But if we're smart, we can do more than simply restore 300 West. We can transform it into what it needs to be now and in the future. When we think streets, we tend to think cars, but it's smarter to think people, riding bikes or a bus, walking or in a wheelchair, people visiting friends, going to work, shopping. There's a lot more to 300 West than just cars. And so we spent a year just listening to people connected to 300 West, which led to thousands of interactions with residents, commuters, shoppers, workers, and business owners. And these people told us that 300 West is already changing from an industrial area to one lined with stores and housing. And these residents and business owners require a more inviting street with safer routes for bikes and pedestrians. Thankfully, the voter-approved 2018 Funding Our Future bond gives Salt Lake City resources to transform this already changing corridor from 2100 South to 900 South. In addition to repaving, upgrading utilities, and fixing sidewalks, a two-way cycling path will give people on bikes a safer alternative to the main road. And a park strip with plants and trees will create a buffer between people in cars and everyone else on 300 West. These additions increase safety, predictability, and accessibility, all the while making the street and shops on the street more attractive and inviting to residents and potential shoppers, giving a boost to local businesses. Salt Lake City is listening, and we've heard that we should focus on people and not just cars. The upcoming transformations on 300 West will be safer and more welcoming to people of all ages and abilities. One more step towards smarter, safer, complete streets for everyone in Salt Lake City.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'll go back to
Drinking
the
water before bed
Oh.
burns pounds in
1
2
second.
weeks. If you are struggling to lose weight and
Oh my
you're over
gosh.
20,
CJ, thanks for sharing the video. As we mentioned earlier, 300 West did win a 2021 Core Value General Project Award from IP2 USA, which is pretty exciting. And we are happy to chat with you at the end of the presentation to answer any questions you have about Core Values Awards, if any of you are interested in pursuing some of those. But I wanted to just recap a few things from the video. So why is this project so important? 300 West was the largest project to come out of Salt Lake City's Funding Our Future bond initiative that was passed in 2018. This project is massive. It's the largest project that the city has ever constructed. The extent of the project is about 1.5 miles long. So it's a very, very long corridor in a historically industrial area that used to be considered the outside of the city. And now it's really part of the core, just next to downtown. 300 West was the biggest opportunity for the city to start incorporating public involvement into their transportation and engineering projects in a way that they had never done before. And, for those of you that know Liz Bueller, you know that she was an OG at the city when it comes to doing public involvement. She really helped create the framework for the way the city does the work that they're doing now. And 300 West built on that and kind of took public involvement to the next level. Mayor Erin Mendenhall referred to the public involvement on the project as the gold standard, and CJ will talk a little bit about why that is the case later on in our presentation. So a few other things: industrial use, lots of generational businesses on this project, companies that were passed, or small businesses that were passed from, grandfather to child to grandchild now, that have been operating there for generations. And people are really wondering, like, why does the city want to come and put a bike lane in an area that was primarily industrial use for a long time? But as you saw in the video, there's hundreds of new residential units coming in, and that's something that is really tied to the city's housing market right now. Development is going crazy. Any developable land is being used almost exclusively for new residential development. So you can see a lot of infill coming in, and these are small apartments. They're people moving in who don't necessarily have cars or don't want to use cars, people who want to get around by bike or use transit or car sharing. And so they want some alternatives in the area of where they're living so that they don't have to use cars. And this bike lane is a world-class facility. I believe it's the first facility like this in the entire state of Utah, which is pretty exciting. So there's a lot of firsts on this project, a lot of big things happening. Also want to mention that this is a major retail area with destination businesses like Target and Walmart, Lowe's, and Home Depot. And surprisingly to some, the world's largest Costco actually sits in Salt Lake City on 300 West. So if you're ever here and you feel like ticking that off your bucket list, you know where to find it. Another challenge to the street and just the composition of the different needs from the public was the addition of a homeless resource center that was built in 2019 that houses, I don't remember exactly how many rooms, but houses some of the city's unsheltered population in this area. So this is a once in 30-year project, and we wanted to make sure it was done right. So we really started with people at the heart of our public involvement process. And we wanted to use as many different tools as made sense that would help us achieve the goals for our project. So you can see the slide right now. There's quite a few things on here touching on some of the different audiences. We were very deliberate in how we selected our audiences. We wanted to make sure that we had them laid out in tiers so that we knew who to focus on and where to focus most of our resources. So you can see here some of the people that we've talked to. Pedestrians, if you look at the pedestrian line, a number of significant and frequent touch points with them. The same thing with transit users and residents. The Utah Trucking Association was an important audience, but one that wasn't built into every single touch point that we had, but we kept them in the loop and made sure that they knew what was going on, and we're happy about the changes that were coming. And CJ, I think we can shift over to the next slide. So some of the specific tools that we used, we started out with focus groups. And I like to talk about public involvement as a risk mitigation strategy because it is. I mean, we are always doing the right thing for the right reason. But one of the benefits and the return of investments on public involvement is the way it can help project teams identify and mitigate risks. And so for us, we used a focus group. We wanted to find out what people were thinking, what people were feeling about a potential construction project on 300 West and about the changes that we were anticipating. One of the really interesting things that came from the focus groups was the surfacing of intersectional issues that really don't have anything to do with the road construction project itself, but that are on the top of people's minds in the city. And one of those is affordable housing. And so we had affordable housing come up, we had gentrification come up, we had issues affecting the unsheltered community come up. And these are not things that are connected to our project, but we know that they were what was on people's minds. And so we were able to bring in other service folks in the city and other service providers in the surrounding community to help plug into these business owners who had some of these questions and concerns so that they could be addressed, not necessarily through the project, but in conjunction with the project. And that really helped smooth things out for us as we were going out and working with some of these communities. So surveys were another really important tool. Online surveys, really great, really easy. You get a lot for the money that you spend on those, but we knew that that wasn't really enough. And we wanted to go out and talk to people in person. So we were very concerned about this project being accessible, about it being equitable, about it being transparent, and about it being trust. And those were the key pillars that our public engagement plan was founded on. And so when we were thinking about the surveys, we know that this community right on 300 West and around 300 West, they don't all speak English. They don't all have access to technology. There's not necessarily a really strong foundation of trust for everyone, with the city or with consultants. And so we wanted to bridge some of those gaps. So we went out and did some pedestrian intercept surveys. And these were one of my favorite things that we did on this project. So we were out there in the summer of 2019. Luckily, we were able to do a lot of in-person involvement before COVID started. But we went out on the corridor during a couple of nights to chat with people. This gentleman here you can see in the photo actually told us that the only way he gets around is on a scooter, which I know people love scooters, but I had never heard of anybody who exclusively uses a scooter to get around. But we were able to talk to a lot of folks, and including some members of the community with disabilities, which was pretty significant because those conversations really led us to an understanding of the nuances of the construction that we would not have been familiar with had we not talked to them. And one in particular is the story, or is a conversation we had with a young family in a wheelchair. So there was the husband walking down the street, there was the wife using the wheelchair, and there was their young daughter riding on the back of the wheelchair. And we were at a corner right across the street from Walmart where we had a lot of engagement. There were a lot of people coming to Walmart either on foot or on the bus or on a bicycle, and we were able to have some really good conversations with them there. But this family told us they're out on 300 West quite a bit. The daughter rides on the back of the wheelchair and mentioned that some kinds of landscaping, including the kind we were standing next to, which is made up of rock, gets down onto the sidewalk and makes for a really bumpy road. And so she had asked if we could think about some different landscaping that could be put out there to make it easier for people in wheelchairs or people using walkers or who had some mobility issues to get around without the risk of stepping on a rock and, just having uncomfortable travel. And once they wrapped up that part of the conversation, the husband told us, he's like, I just want you to build a sidewalk that's wide enough that I can hold my wife's hand as we walk down the street. And that seems like a simple thing, but it's when you have your engineers out talking to people on a project and they hear a story like that, it completely changes the dynamic for them because they're not used to seeing how what they're designing and building is going to impact people's quality of life. So these pedestrian intercept surveys were hugely beneficial to our team, not just in getting information about the design, but also in understanding the nuance. And then one quick thing before we switch slides is we had a flyer that we took out with us. We had it in English, we had it in Spanish, but the benefit of the flyer was actually the photos, that you didn't need to understand any language to understand what was going to be coming out here. The pictures were very obvious in terms of safety for sidewalks, safety for crosswalks, preferences for bike lanes, and we could just give it to people and have them point and then mark down their responses. So we found that really solid pictures, good graphics, easy to understand visual information can actually overcome quite a bit of a language barrier. And that was a huge benefit to us when we were doing the pedestrian intercept surveys. And next slide, CJ. So our largest stakeholder group on this project was the business community. And, as I mentioned before, it's very diverse. There's a lot of generational businesses. We have huge retail out here, and not everybody wants the same thing. And we knew that if we didn't have the buy-in from the business community, that this project was really going to stumble right out of the gate. So we involved them from the outset. We had a series of different workshops where they could come in and look at the road as it currently is, look at the proposed changes. They were able to give us feedback about which side of the road the bike lane needed to be on, what kind of bike lane we wanted to have, whether it was one lane in each direction or a dual lane on one side of the road. And engaging them in this way really helped us create some sustainable decisions and sustainable buy-in that was able to carry us through the rest of the design project. We are in construction now. We had a pretty big bank account of capital with these businesses that has gotten pretty heavily used over this last year of construction. But this was a hugely important part of our public involvement process. And it was something I think that made this a success, not only for our team, but also for the city. A couple of other important stakeholder groups were the community with disabilities and the unsheltered community. I think, CJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but on 300 West, for the first time ever, we had what we called a mobility tour, where we worked with the city's accessibility and advisory committee to bring together a group of stakeholders from the community with disabilities. And this was actually led by and implemented by a gentleman who works for the Center for the Blind here in Salt Lake City, Utah. And we took this group out. We had them look at a street nearby that had recently been updated. So things with new ADA crosswalks, new signals, some new things for them to get an idea of what is possible. And then we took them to 300 West, where some parts of the sidewalk are okay. Some parts of the sidewalk are missing. Some parts of the sidewalk are extremely narrow or sloped and make it very challenging for people in wheelchairs to get around. We noticed wheels getting stuck in cracks of the sidewalk. We also had a pair of friends who were deaf who were having a conversation. They were speaking in sign language, and when the sidewalk narrowed down, they had to shift so that one was in front and one was in back, and it completely cut that conversation off until they were able to get to a part of the corridor that had a sidewalk where two people could go side by side. So again, some really interesting things that our engineers and our designers may not have been thinking about, but once they were able to work in concert with some of these groups, the benefit to the project just soared as a result of this. So we also held a workshop for the unsheltered community at the Gail Miller Homeless Resource Center. This was in November of 2019, and really, really interesting. And again, I think this may have been the first time that Salt Lake City has done something like this. And now these types of things, mobility tours and presentations to the unsheltered community, have become baked into some of the projects. But, you know, we talked to the unsheltered folks about what we were doing. They gave us some really good information about drainage issues on the corridor, and just provided some context about if they're out walking around and there's a rainstorm or snow melt and they step in a curb that doesn't have good drainage, their shoes and socks are wet and they don't have anywhere to go for the rest of the day. So this information was just very significant to our team. And we were also able to start building relationships with these stakeholders that have carried us through construction. So, all right, CJ, I think we can go to the next one. So one of the important things, and all of you who've been through IAP2 training know that you have to report back to the community about what you've done. And so once we had the plan, the public engagement plan fully executed in the design phase, once we had some of the design ideas and concepts ready to go, we went back and did a Facebook Live event. We know that this didn't reach everybody, but it was a really great tool to help us reach our business community and then help reach some of the residents that live out on the corridor. We created flyers and we sent those back through all of our project distribution lists. We sent them to the Homeless Resource Center, and worked with the Accessibility Advisory Committee again to make sure that all of their members had the information and knew how their input was used to develop the different concepts and designs. These are just a couple of photos of the accessibility tour. In a previous slide, there was a photo titled "How to Survive Construction." And this was a really great thing that the city asked for. It was a way to help the different stakeholders on the project understand what was coming during construction and start preparing so that they could be resilient and weather some of the impacts. And this was a really awesome tool. I believe it's the first tool of this kind that's being used in Utah. And we had just a lot of success on this. It is now standard practice for all the construction projects to use this tool, and they all have an accompanying workshop, either in person or online as well, to help answer questions. So CJ, I think that's everything for me. Oh, no, there's a little bit more. Okay, so this slide doesn't look very exciting, but it's actually pretty significant. So I talked a little bit about risk identification and mitigation being a return on investment for public involvement. But there was another significant return on investment for this project, and that is that the city didn't have a budget to purchase any right-of-way on this project. And so when we were having conversations about the design and what the city wanted to accomplish, one of those things was reducing the number of driveways and reducing the number of feet of driveways out on the project. Because we're putting in a bike lane, we want to reduce the number of impact points that are coming for drivers and pedestrians and cyclists. And so cutting down the number of driveways and shrinking those up was really important. This was an example of 17 parking stalls that are actually back out stalls onto 300 West. So those no longer conform with city standards. And the business owner here, he had some really tough property managers who went to bat for him. They were telling us, well, you can't have one parking stall. One parking stall has the, retail equivalent of $40,000. So unless you're going to pay for those parking stalls, we're not willing to reduce the amount of parking stalls to help improve safety on this project. So we knew that they cared about this project. We know they saw the benefit of it, but they weren't willing to really give us anything for free. We spent a number of meetings negotiating with them on different designs about how we could keep all of the parking spaces that were available, but do them in a way where people weren't backing onto the street and potentially creating accidents or, running into pedestrians. And so CJ, if you want to go to the next slide, what we were able to do was actually move those stalls to the back. And this was the direct result of the public involvement work that we did on this project and the relationships that our team had with businesses. So we negotiated to improve parking in the back. We were able to shift a number of those parking spaces in the front to the back and redesign the front of the parking so that they kept all of their spaces, and we were able to reduce the driveway width down to 70 feet. And instead of having one long stretch of a back out driveway, we now have two smaller driveways into this property. And this is one of the things that I feel like is a huge success. We weren't sure we were ever going to get here, but we kept working on it and we did. CJ, if you want to go to the next slide. So here's just a few of the stats in terms of the return on the investment. We did have to remove all street parking. And for the most part, that really wasn't challenging because this is not an area where people park on the street. You don't park on the street generally when you go to Target or you go to Walmart, but there were some businesses that did have street parking, including a food truck business, which made it challenging. And those conversations were difficult, but we were able to get there. We have 39 fewer stalls that back onto 300 West, which is huge. We closed 24 driveways and we did that without spending a dime of money from the city. We did that all because of the public involvement and the relationships we built during this project. And then finally, we're able to reduce driveways by 844 feet over the length of the 1.5 mile project. So these are some pretty significant wins. We've not calculated this to determine how much money the city saved as a result of these things happening, but it's significant, and the relationships that were built out there are significant. This project was huge in a lot of ways, and I'm going to kick it over to CJ so she can talk more about that.
Thanks so much, Stacy, for going through all of that. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of talk about how, the lessons that we learned on this project, as Stacy has already mentioned, continue to inform how we approach public engagement on other projects since then and moving forward. So as Stacy mentioned, it was great to hear that Mayor Mendenhall called this the gold standard of public engagement. And as as has already been mentioned, this was such a huge construction project for the city. It's going to be transformative for this neighborhood as well as the city as a whole. So I think it will be hard to replicate, I think maybe everything that we did on this project, just because it was, such a unique project. But at the same time, we are definitely taking lessons learned. So a lot of the things that, did feel maybe really kind of unique and transformative at the time, like are being carried over into other projects now, including kind of these mobility tours, walking tours, biking tours, and the accessibility tour that we did specifically with the Disabled Rights Action Committee of Utah. But I just wanted to show an example of, on the right is a picture from the 300 West accessibility tour that we did. But on the left is a photo of a tour that we did in 2021. Again, during the pandemic, but we were still able to do an outdoor kind of masked mobility tour in West Side neighborhoods. And that continues to be a big focus of the city, is just doing more equitable and accessible engagement, especially for West Side neighborhoods. And I think a lot of those lessons came from what we did on 300 West. And I also just want to mention that, you know, this 300 West was, I think, kind of a renewed consideration about accessibility. And I personally learned a lot about transportation accessibility on the 300 West tour, but also about how to host a more accessible event and the tour itself. And so I have definitely continually learned, you know, how to do better in telling people, you know, what the tour is going to encompass, how long it's going to be, like what people can expect. And it's also just an ongoing process with Salt Lake City to ensure that materials and public engagement are both ADA accessible as well as translated into the most spoken non-English languages. So the city has an ADA coordinator and a language access coordinator that are now very heavily involved with all public engagement to make sure that that is being considered, which I think is a great, you know, best practice moving forward. And then also, as you know, Stacy mentioned, we wanted to report back to the community members and just the general public, stakeholders involved with 300 West. So on the right, you can see a picture from the Facebook Live event that we did for 300 West. And as you know, as we mentioned, we were lucky to be able to do a lot of in-person engagement on 300 West before the pandemic began. But I think Salt Lake City definitely has pivoted to a lot of digital outreach that, you know, has been a necessity just because of, you know, fluctuating COVID cases. So these Facebook Live events, we use them as kind of like an Ask Me Anything session, have become really popular. And we did a lot of COVID focused ones in 2020. In 2021, we have kind of branched out and done a lot of just individual projects from the city. Like on the left, you can see one that we did about West Side transit changes that are coming, and some have already been implemented in the city. And you know, in some ways, they have actually been a lot more successful than the in-person town hall events that the city used to do, just because I think that for some residents, even for a lot of residents, online engagement like this is more accessible than a traditional kind of in-person open house that happens maybe like on a weeknight or something. Because even if people can't attend this online event live in the moment, it's always, you know, it's still published and people can go and watch it later and comment later. So in some ways it's more accessible, but I will note that, you know, the city is very focused on bridging the digital divide, and so that continues to be a challenge, but we are working on that side of it as well. So I think this is a great tool, but we do want to think about it holistically as well. So yeah, just to conclude, you know, the key takeaways that we had from the 300 West project, as Stacy mentioned, you know, building these relationships with key stakeholders, especially, you know, a lot of the business owners on this project, really kind of can make or break the success of a project. So, you know, they were hugely important, but we also built relationships with these kind of traditionally marginalized and underrepresented voices, like folks in the disabled community, and folks that are experiencing homelessness. So I think that was huge, and kind of related to that, I think building relationships and inclusion and equity are really tied together in that. Collaboration throughout the city. This was the first, you know, big project that I really worked on with the city, but I still, you know, even till today, I'm so impressed and amazed by how much collaboration there was between all the different departments and divisions. And I also just want to note that it was huge that we had such great support from the mayor and the city council, who are pictured here, who helped us do the kickoff event for the 300 West construction. Meeting people where they are, as Stacy mentioned, we did the pedestrian intercept surveys. So we actually talked to people on the street, and then also did, so many business owner meetings with the folks that are already there in the area. And communicating the vision. I think the video that we did, I feel like really demonstrated this, but this is, again, such a transformational project for the area and for the city as a whole. And it was, at least the public engagement side of it was so positive to hear from people who really believe that this was, generally this is the right direction to go. So that was really encouraging. And finally, that engagement, clearly takes time and energy. Some of the activities, especially like hosting an accessibility mobility tour, I'm sure maybe other people have done this type of thing, but creating events like this does take a lot of time, especially if you're partnering with other community groups to do it. But it definitely was worth it, for the project team, and I think just kind of us individually as people to learn lessons from activities like that. So yeah, I will just close on that saying that we are, all continually learning about how to best do public engagement, especially during pandemic. And we, pivoted a little bit on this project in doing that, but we're all just learning and trying to continue to figure it out. And so I just want to encourage everyone to just be patient and flexible with yourselves and your coworkers. And yeah, we're just all learning and adapting together. So thank you so much. And yeah, we'll end and let people ask questions about the project. And then we can also just go into open discussion. But thanks so much.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, CJ, for sharing this really wonderful project with us today. There are some questions that people have dropped in the chat, and we'll start with those. If you have any additional questions, please feel free. You can add it to the chat. We'll add it to the queue, and also raise your hand if you'd like to ask the question directly. We're going to start off with a question about that video you showed at the start of your presentation. Where was this video shown?
So we showed this video at every place we had the opportunity to do it. We put it online, we sent it out in emails. I think the video we showed at the presentation to the Gail Miller Homeless Resource Center, we showed it during the Facebook Live events, and we really wanted to just push it out as much as possible. So we would remind people in emails and communications where they could find it. It was put in project newsletters, and that's what I remember. CJ, is there anything else that you would add to that?
Yeah, I think that covered it. Yeah, I mean, just I think the online side of it. Yeah, we definitely posted it on social media, and it's on YouTube, and we can post the link to that. Actually, I'll post the link to it. But yeah, that's it.
Did you ever share that video as a public service announcement in local media?
No, it was, the video primarily was to help share the vision of the project, and then also to report back about the public involvement work that we did on the project so that people knew. And it was really satisfying for people to, ask, well, did you talk to so-and-so? And we were like, yes, we did. And here's what they said. Well, what about this group? Well, yes, we did. And here's what they said. So we wanted people to understand that this wasn't a project that was just going to be pushed onto them by the city, that they had a real opportunity to influence what was going to be coming, and that they couldn't make every decision. And that was a huge part of, our approach to talking to people, was to be candid, to let them know that, like, this project isn't going to solve every single problem. It's not going to realize every single opportunity, but we're going to deal with, we're going to get most of those things accomplished. But it's not, we don't have the money to do every single thing that we might want to do. So we wanted to be really candid, but we also wanted to make sure we were reporting back and that people knew how their input was used.
Y'all did a lot for this. What was your engagement communications budget?
For this project, so this would have been the design phase, which ran for about 18 months, starting in 2019. we had $104,000 approximately in our budget. So that's what it took to do all of this. And a big chunk of some of the things that we did, and we didn't talk about this in the presentation, but in 2020, after we had had our business workshops, there were about 40 properties on the project corridor that had some kind of impact. And you saw that a little bit with the business that had the 17 back out parking stalls, but there were other properties that had similar or different challenges. And we actually went out and met with them all individually. So the great news was we were meeting outside. We could do that with masks on. We could do that safely. We felt comfortable. They felt comfortable. It was a nice way to keep the momentum of those relationships going. But part of that, those meetings was showing them an exhibit of the design and how it would impact their property. So we had a pretty hefty chunk of our budget that went to our engineering and our graphics team to help create that information so that we had good, easy to understand visuals for the property owners and the businesses that were going to be experiencing some impacts that maybe others on the project wouldn't be.
Was that budget on your side, Stacy, on the consulting side, or was that budget on the city side with CJ?
That was the consulting team only.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna now turn it over to Danny. She has a question.
Thanks, Liz. Stacy, you were just sort of getting at this I think in the last comment that you had about, not being able to solve every problem or, fulfill every dream when people were imagining a new corridor here. How did you set those expectations, like first internally, I think, like how did you work with city staff, the engineers and planners within the city to say, okay, we're doing engagement on this and the tagline is reimagine 300 West. Like, did that bring up any anxieties internally, and how did you sort of deal with that and get all of the internal stakeholders or internal staff on the same page about what decisions were already made and what decisions public input was going to influence?
Yeah, so I'll frame this a little bit as kind of a transportation and engineering kind of conversation. So the city has an absolutely phenomenal director of transportation. He's a visionary, and all of his team is like that too. So when they came out of the gate with this project, they talked about this corridor in a way that I've never heard somebody talk about a city road before, about it being an experience, about it being beautiful, about it being a place where people wanted to actually come. The language was not utilitarian. It wasn't just about how the road was going to function. It truly was about the people who were going to be using it and what did they need, but also what did the city want to provide? How do we want this road to be? Because it is a significant corridor into the city. It does, I think, if I remember right, it's either the second or third highest retail generating revenue of the city. I mean, it's significant. And if you were to drive out there before, it just looks like garbage. If you were going to buy a condo there, it's dirty, it's run down, the facades are old, the road is old, the sidewalks are junky, there's not sidewalk in all the locations. You see people using wheelchairs in the outside lane of the road. So the city's transportation division knew from the start that they wanted it to be something different. And there was tension with the engineering part of the city when they're like, well, we need to build a road that's going to last, that can be maintained, that we can pay for and take care of. And so none of those values were exclusionary to each other, but it did require a number of conversations to really get everybody on the same page and to believe that this could be what the transportation division was hoping that it would be. They weren't able to put everything out here, and we had talked about putting fountains and little, green space areas and things like that. And those things didn't actually get realized at this point in time, and maybe they will in the future. But I mean, I feel that we were exceptionally lucky to have the staff from Salt Lake City working on this, because they all care about these roads, and they care about them in different ways depending on whether you're in transportation or engineering. But I think the vision from the mayor and the vision from the leadership of these two groups really help us bridge whatever divides were there. I mean, we had just, the conversations almost seemed kind of, I don't know, I'm just going to use the word stupid. They're not stupid, but when we're arguing about why we can't have a nice bike lane because there's not a piece of equipment that can keep it clean, we need to be talking about things that are bigger than that, right? Not symptoms of problems in the city. Let's get to the root of the problem. Let's figure out how we make the thing we want without having to, slap a bunch of Band-Aids across it. So that was huge. Our engineering team, I will just brag here for a minute about Avenue Consulting, but we have some very transformational project managers on our team. I live in Salt Lake City. This project was very personal to me, so I know what I'm bringing to it because it's in my backyard and it's a place where I shop. So I think you had a lot of people who had very professional investments, who had personal investments in this. It was the biggest project Salt Lake City's ever done, and we wanted it to be amazing. And I think it was amazing. I mean, we did have tension that we had to work through. We did have conflicts that we had to work through, but we had a really good team. We brought in a lot of conflict resolution tools. We brought in a lot of visioning and consensus building tools to help our internal team get it before we went out. And I hope that answers your question. I may have kind of gotten too, squishy in there, but if you have another specific question, let me know.
Well, Christiana or CJ, do you have any insight from the city side too?
Yeah, I think Stacy did a good job of kind of talking about how there's always going to be a hard balance from the city side of we aren't able to fulfill everything. We have, there are limits to what we can do. But I still, even with that being said, I think that this project did go really well just because, there are always going to be things that we wish we could have done, like Stacy said, like more green space and fountains and more like placemaking elements and things like that. But I think that we still all, like she said, there's a lot of consensus building and getting to a point where we all can be proud of the project that has been designed and is already in construction, that this is really sets the foundation for building upon it, and I think that's kind of, I think at the end of the day, what we can do from the city side is really kind of move these projects forward, especially a project of this scale. It's going to be transformative, just with the kind of street changes. And then I think that we can just build upon it, with like the placemaking and some of these other kind of things that people want within the city, and also, the community members that wanted more from it. And I think we can just build on it. So, yeah.
That's great. Thanks to you both. I don't want to take up all the time here, but I am curious to hear examples of the consensus building tools or techniques that you used, and the conflict resolution tools and techniques, if you have specific examples of those.
Well, I can share a good consensus building technique that we use here at Avenue. We've done this on a number of projects, but we actually use Legos to do to build cross sections of the road. And so we brought the internal Salt Lake City team in. I think most people were on the same page, about what was coming. Transportation had already talked about what they envisioned for the road, but we had a fixed footprint because we didn't have a budget to purchase any right of way. And so, people wanted to add trees, other people want bigger park strips. There were a lot of wants that were coming into this. Salt Lake City's Public Lands Division was coming in, they had some specific ideas about what they wanted. Part of this project, and we didn't even talk about this, was the replacement of 3 major underground utilities, so the water line, the sewer, and the storm drain, which is significantly impactful, to road construction. But we were able to build these Lego concepts, and every group that we had in this meeting got to kind of throw everything they wanted, and people could start to see, well, if we do a 10-foot trail and a 10-foot bike lane, we're going to have to remove a travel lane, and we don't really feel like that's a good trade-off. And so I think that was a meeting, everyone, I feel like there was a lot of realism with our team as we were coming into this, but there were still these sort of feelings of like, well, we have to try to shoehorn in everything. And I feel like at this meeting, everyone kind of saw the reality of what we were dealing with, that without money to purchase right of way, we were not going to get everything. And so how do we make the best of what we did have? And I think that was a really helpful meeting. And then in terms of conflict resolution, we had a really great project. Well, we had really great project managers on this. And I feel like the PI team, because we were able to do so much work and be able to really tell the story of the needs of the community on this project, or, you know, what things that they didn't want. For instance, because there's a homeless resource service center out there, a fountain is just something that people were not going to accept. But people felt like, no, we should have this resource for this group of people, or we do want this because it's beautiful, but how is it going to be maintained? How is it going to be kept clean? How are people going to feel safe if there's a fountain that, you know, people might be doing laundry in, or, you know, bathing in, or things like that? And so there were some tension points like that where we had to talk through those conversations. And CJ, I would love to know what you feel like too.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, I know we didn't even include photos of the Lego workshop that we did, but I feel like I'm sure we can find a link there was like a news story about it actually. So, but yeah, I think that was a really great exercise to kind of visualize everything. And I think there were also maybe less exciting things, but were still important, like just spreadsheets, going through spreadsheets of like what, and like giving scores to like what we felt like was what all the staff from different departments felt like was most important, and how we're going to weight, you know, certain elements of the design, and, you know, things like that again are maybe not as fun or as exciting, but are just concrete exercises to go through with in a group. I think that stuck with me as being some of the most like helpful ways to work through some of those issues.
So I want to end our session today with a question we all have. Is the project done?
The design phase of the project is done. We are in construction. We are getting ready to start the second year of construction, hopefully the final year of construction. We're anticipating being done by the end of 2022. If you travel in this area, please sign up for updates. I'm going to send our project website here to everyone. The video is listed here. You can actually see a bunch of the information from the design and concept development phase. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to CJ and I. We're happy to chat more about this. I do want to just quickly mention that if any of you are thinking about applying for a core values award with IAP2, that you should do it. It can feel a little bit daunting. There are excellent project examples on IAP2's webpage. CJ and I would be happy to chat with you. You can read our project application, which has everything, like the whole universe of 300 West is contained within this application. And, you know, there's some really unique things in there that we didn't have time to touch on today, but we'd be happy to share that with you.
Well, thank you again, Stacy. Thank you, CJ. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This has been really great discussion, and this project, you guys put so much work into this project. Just for our little plug, we have these learning lunches once a month. It's the second Thursday of each month at 12 p.m. And we have a lot of great other topics in the coming months. So please come back. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It's great to chat with you.
Thanks so much,
Thanks
everyone.
all.
Thanks everyone.
Yep. Take care. So Liz, are we staying on for a second? Do we need to debrief on anything?
Nope, you are good. Of course, I have to go facilitate another meeting.
Okay.
Perfect.
You guys
Thanks,
did
Liz.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
Sure.
you. Bye, all.
Bye.
Guys.